Welcome to the Ephesiology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the study of the early Christian movement and its implications for the church today. Today we are joined, as always, with Michael, our resident ephesiologist. My name is Andrew Johnson. I am associate pastor at Neartown Church, and we are joined by Chad Clarkson. Chad is the director of HCPN, the Houston Church Planting Network. And I'm now getting into your title, Chad, and I realized, have you had a title change now that we've had some shifting at HCPN?
No, it's still the same.
Okay, so
rolling with that.
Chad isn't just a friend. He also offices about 500, 600 feet from me. So we're in the same complex. We get to see each other a lot. But for our listeners, Chad, they don't know you, and they may not know what HCPN is. And so would you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are and maybe some of the most important things about you?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So Chad Clarkson, great to be on here today. Andrew, Michael, so thanks for having me. I'm from the Midwest, grew up in Iowa, born and raised in Iowa, where I lived probably for the first 22 years of my life, probably close to that. And then from there, spent some time in South Carolina, a little time in Colorado, and eventually made my way to Texas. So I am married. I'm married a Texan. That's kind of how I ended up here. Part of the story. Met her in South Carolina, took her back to Iowa. We planted a church there, and her first winter in Iowa, I think the snow was on the ground like 119 straight days or something. And so she's like, I'm not sure this is going to work. So long story short, we ended up in Houston. So that's where we're at now.
Oh, so you exchange snow for humidity.
Snow for humidity is right.
And that's better?
Nah, some days. Not during the summer, it's not. During the winter, it is. So depends on the season. I miss the seasons. Houston doesn't have a lot of seasons. It's hot a lot, so I miss that. But I don't miss the snow after the first couple of weeks and the bitter cold that you know that from Michigan and stuff. But it gets cold. So
yeah, good. Well, we're glad to have you on, Chad, to talk about what you've been doing there and in Houston. And it's been fun to follow vicariously through Andrew. And so grateful that we can talk more about it.
So Chad, you have been all over. You guys have planted churches. You are now back in Houston, Texas, or not back, but you are in Houston, Texas. You've been here for a long time. We talk about the Houston Church Planting Network, but for those who are uninitiated or haven't run across you all or us, what is Houston Church Planting Network? How did that get started? How long ago? What are we looking at?
Yeah, sure. So I came to Houston originally to plant a church. So we even started something in our living room. This is back in 2003 to 2004, after spending some time, like I mentioned, in Colorado, South Carolina, Iowa, being involved in church planting. And so moved here to plant. My wife was from this area, as I had mentioned. And long story short, a couple things I think were stirring. Even though we were starting, God was stirring some other things up. One, I felt lonely. So just kind of being by myself, and just kind of felt the desire to kind of be connected to not only other believers, but other leaders in the church, other churches, other pastors, things like that. And probably a meeting, not necessarily a meeting, but I was at a conference called, what was it called? It was put on by Leadership Network, Camp Improv. And so it was in Dallas. Went up there, and long story short, I ended up getting a chance to hang around Bruce Wesley, Mark Carden, a couple of the other pastors at Clear Creek Community Church, which was a church about 10 minutes from where I was living. And I was familiar with Clear Creek, had visited there, and just kind of introduced myself. I was by myself. I was supposed to go with someone else, and they kind of let me hang around them and just kind of got to know them a little bit. Then as I got to know the church a little bit, kind of read some of the stuff that Bruce had put together and read his vision to see, hey, we want to be part of planting 1,000 churches. And so long story short, that started some conversations. I remember just feeling a pull where the Spirit seemed to be saying, hey, you need to talk to Bruce about possibly connecting with Clear Creek and what that could look like. So I just approached him and I said, hey, this is on my heart. Is something stirring? So long story short, this is probably fast forward a little bit. I ended up coming on board as the pastor of church planting and missions there at Clear Creek. So probably 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. And so really the first person in that role, they'd ever had a church planting pastor. They had helped plant one church in Mexico at this time. The church was doing really well, but they really hadn't thought a lot about church planting up to this point, even though it was in some of the original. Bruce was a church planter, had helped assess church planters, and they had that heart. So I came on board to kind of help give leadership to that. So that's kind of where it began. And really, it was coming in with a clean slate. So there wasn't like, we had like a whiteboard. It was white. There was nothing on it. There was no like, all right, missionaries that we were supporting that we had to figure out, or church plants. So we were really starting from a clean slate. So we really just developed kind of the vision there off of Acts 1:8. We thought, all right, let's look at scripture. That feels like a good place to start. So,
how novel.
Yeah, how novel. Exactly. So, after the ascension, Jesus says, you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, when the Spirit comes on you, to the ends of the earth. So we really kind of built that kind of with that target-driven geography. I'd been really influenced by a missiologist named Dwight Smith, who kind of been through a lot of his kind of some of his teaching, and been in the room with him a few times. And I think he really drilled some missional DNA into me. And part of that was like a target-driven mentality. So we kind of built kind of that vision for Clear Creek off of that. So our Jerusalem was really for us kind of what we call the Bay Area of Houston. So Houston as a whole is, it's 10,000 square miles. So big geography. So where we're at, we're not in the city. We're more of a suburb, southeast side. So we kind of defined our boundaries. We gave a name to it. We call it the 4B area. The 4B marks our boundaries. The north is the beltway of our boundary. It's the road. The south is the beach. So we got Galveston. We run out of space. The Bay is our third one, kind of on the east. And then the west, our west boundary is Brazoria County, that line there. So for us, it's the 4B area. It's not a perfect circle or square, kind of an amoeba shape, but that's really the geography. We've said, all right, it's our Jerusalem. We're going to take responsibility for every man, woman, and child in that geography, hopefully having repeated opportunities to say yes or no to Jesus. So that was kind of our heart with our Jerusalem. And then so over time, we've just been committed to church planting in that area, starting sites. So Clear Creek now has 5 sites. We're 4 sites, and then a Wednesday we do that functions as a separate service. We build partnerships with other churches in our Jerusalem, because we realize, all right, Clear Creek's not the only church in that area that cares about lostness and brokenness in our geography. And we work with other. Yeah.
Because this is an important part of this story. And side note, Chad just kind of casually mentioned Houston is 10,000 square miles. So that means, if those who are nerds, Houston is bigger in square mileage than 9 other states. So we fall between states that like we're big. So when we're talking about a large square area for Houston, it's a very large square area. Now, when talking about this large square area, you were almost yada-ing past the notion that Clear Creek started to reach out to other churches who were in the areas within the Bs. Why? Why did you guys say we cannot do this alone? Why did you start to link arms with others?
Yeah, probably a couple reasons. One, it's probably a mindset. One, to kind of think you're the only church in the area. That's just not, it's probably not a biblical mindset. And 2, not a posture from humility, just thinking, oh, we can get it done by ourselves, which just isn't true. It's going to take all of God's people to be involved in the mission. And all of God's people just aren't at Clear Creek Community Church, right? Bay Area Community Church, they're at Heritage Park, they're at One Life. I'm kind of pointing out some churches in our area that we partner with. So it's going to take all of the church to really help get after God's mission together. So we had that commitment, I think, from the beginning, to be engaged in working with other churches.
And what did that look like, Chad? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, similar, with when I'll talk about HCPN, it's a similar of, just building relationships. We talk in terms of when we talk in terms of collaboration, we say it really has two wings of the airplane, right? It's got mission and relationships. Those are two wings of the airplane for the collaboration airplane. So the idea of mission is, all right, hey, we're about this geography. It's target driven. It's every man, woman, and child. For us at that time, it was 500,000 people in the 4B area. Now it's 620,000 people. So just thinking one church can't, again, if Clear Creek had 10 campuses of 5,000 people each, we're still not getting 10% of that population, right? So it's kind of that mentality of, all right, we have a similar mission. And so the other churches kind of share that similar mission. And that's another, I think, a learn for us in collaboration, that context is such a benefit when it comes to collaboration. When churches share the same context, it just helps fuel that because you're on a similar mission. I mean, the church down the street is also committed to making disciples in this area. So let's find a way to work with them. So it's that side of the wing. And then the other side of the wing is just relationships, which takes time, right? It takes time to build relationships of trust, get to know other pastors. Probably a lot of cups of coffee. We talk a lot about, it's sitting down, drinking tea, drinking coffee, just getting to know pastors and just letting them know, hey, we're not just trying to come across, because we're one of the largest churches, if not the largest churches in Galveston County. So sometimes that can come across as a threat and want to instead, take a different posture. And it's like, hey, we're for you. How can we work together? How can we partner? So a lot of that mentality. So some of that's just building relationships, and then practically that gets worked out in a lot of ways. So now in the 4B area, so I think we have like 30 some gospel partners, meaning they're ministries, gospel-centered ministries that are in the community in the 4B area that we work with. And also other churches work with those. So we look for ways to partner with churches in those specific projects. During the hurricane, we started the 4B disaster response. So it was a collaboration or collection of churches that kind of emerged out of the Hurricane Harvey and still exists. They're still doing work now, 5 years later, working together. Most recently, we started a counseling center with another church that we're partnering together for the 4B area specifically. So it's not just one church, it's churches working together. So that's kind of a little bit of a feel for that.
I wanted to drill down on the partnership discussions because that fascinates me. I mean, the reality of our day is that we feel like Christianity is so fragmented that we're out to build our own brands in our area, that we're trying to differentiate ourselves from other churches. But what you're talking about really is something quite different. So tell us a little bit about those partnership discussions. What went on in those conversations? What were the topics that you guys were seeing as important to bring you together to do the things that ultimately united you on that mission?
Yeah, another good question. I think for me, when it comes to partnership, I think for me, it's convictional. So I think it starts there. So I remember, we talked about growing up. I remember where I was. You know how it is the first time you read a passage and it grabs you, maybe sometimes you kind of remember where you were at and wherever it was. So I remember the first time, it may not have been the first time I read it, but the first time I read or got a hold of John 17. I was a high school student. And I remember just reading Jesus's words about, his prayer really as he looked into the future about the church being one. And that was just impressed upon my heart as a high school student. So much so I started a high school group on campus to try to bring, believers together in high school. That carried on in college. So I've always kind of had that DNA of, all right, I want the church to work together. And the more I've unpacked that passage, it just feels like, all right, our mission as a church is more effective when we're together. And I'm not saying that our unity saves people. I'm not taking away anything from the cross. Don't hear that. But there's something happen as I read those verses in John 17 that it says the world may know. They're going to respond that and understand that Jesus came for them and that he loves them because of our unity. So for me, it's convictional on that partnership side, Michael. And so that's something that I haven't been to get away from. And I feel like when you kind of get that, it's like, all right, it's like a lifetime vision. It's like, all right, I can't get away from it. It's kind of shaped me for the rest of my life. So I think for early on the partnership, it's kind of convictional. And then, so when you're having those conversations, you can kind of see who the Spirit is striking a match with, if that makes sense. That's kind of has a similar heartbeat. Are they trying to build their kingdom or want to see God's kingdom come here in Houston? It doesn't take too many conversations to kind of feel that out. Who's got a similar heartbeat. So.
Okay. So now when you've got these partnerships, right, and there's this potential, right, this convictional grab of, hey, I hear what you're saying and I see where you want to go. This is where I'm saying what we are and where we want to go. I'll just say historically and observationally, sometimes denominations just like to play in their own sandboxes, and they don't really like to figure out how can we collaborate. So how have you guys approached this? How have you dealt with some of the denominational differences that you guys have found we can still unite and move forward convictionally?
Yeah. So in related to HCPN, or
I would say I literally realized that was fast forwarding a conversation a bit. How did you initially deal with that with Clear Creek? Because if I'm not mistaken, Clear Creek is Southern Baptist. SBC.
Yeah, we say interdenominational, but we're Southern Baptist roots. We work with several. Yeah.
So how did you all first deal with that? And then I guess fast forwarding a little bit, how is HCPN dealing with that?
Yeah. Well, I think for us from the beginning, it's like, all right, we're looking for churches that are committed to the gospel. Ultimately, that's where we say that this is our meeting point. All right, we're meeting at the gospel, both the proclamation and demonstration of the gospel. So, with that, I mean, again, it's a similar, kind of similar feel. You'll see churches that are focused on that, or focused on other things. And I think in terms of partnership, you're not going to get every church at the table, if that makes sense. So, what's a good way to say this? So if say you've got the spectrum of churches, for us, we're focused on the gospel, focused on church planting. We may not get churches that may be, I want to be kind, but at the same time, not committed to the gospel, maybe leaning more, what's a good word? Liberal church. I don't know what you want to say, however you want to say it. But leaning that side, they're not thinking evangelism, let alone church planting. So they're not at the table. They're not churches we're necessarily running after. And then on the other side, you may have maybe more fundamental churches that, all right, we're probably going to see you in heaven, but they're so committed to their truth or their version of the truth that one of the things we found is a passion for truth and unity don't exist in the same church. And I'm not saying that a passion for the truth, Jesus, but kind of their version of the truth, or maybe, on secondary issues, this is the way to do things. If people are so committed to that, they're not going to come to the collaboration table. So it's that middle kind of pocket of churches that we're really focused in on working with. I don't know if that helps kind of clarify a little bit.
Well, it does. And I find it funny because, well, I shouldn't say funny. Funny is the wrong word. I find it interesting because it's a breath of fresh air. And I almost feel like it does echo that John 17 call for unity. It does echo kind of where we're driving, but it's so shocking just because, I grew up non-denominational, but the only churches that we did stuff with were other non-denominational churches, right? That we were all part of. I grew up in Indianapolis, and so that's a mecca for like the Christian church, which is non-denominational, but we're all the same. So it's like its own denomination, and we only played with each other, and we didn't really deal with the Baptists. We definitely didn't deal with any of the high church, some of the Episcopalian and the Lutheran. Like that was all very foreign to me. And that was the tone, at least when I grew up. I'm not saying that's the tone in Indianapolis anymore. I'm just saying that's what it was. And so I saw similar things when I was in Flagstaff. I saw similar things when I was in Tempe. And so coming to Houston, it's a big change of pace. It's a big encouragement that so many churches are willing to not lead first with their denominational boundaries. I'm not saying they're abandoning who they are. I'm not saying they've said, who cares? But that's not what they lead with. They lead with the good news of Jesus Christ, with the gospel, and they unite around that conviction and then say, okay, how can we do this together? And that just seems so different. Michael, I'm speaking from my Houston context. I'm not trying to out where you are, but is what Chad's describing where we are, do you sense a change in that where you live as well?
I hope we're moving in that direction. And this begs one of the questions, Chad. Tell us a little bit about how diverse that network of churches is. You gave us the extremes that aren't coming into that network, but within the network itself, what are we talking about in terms of the diversity?
Yeah, like ethnically or denominationally or both and?
Both and.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you come to one of our gatherings, like we do these gatherings for HCPN, you'll get a feel like, oh man, this feels like a diverse room. Is it as diverse as Houston yet? No. Houston's got 350 people groups, 220 languages. So we are not there yet, but we're growing in diversity and we want to work intentionally at that diversity. So we do have even reflected in our residencies or some of the things we do, you'll see different ethnicities. Even in this year's residency, we have Asian, African-American, Caucasian, Hispanic, all represented together in the same cohort for residency. Also, you'll see different networks and denominations at the table. So we have an Anglican guy in our residency this year, Baptist. I'm trying to think we talk in terms of HCPN as being a network of networks. And so we've probably got 35 different groups at the table. So representing, denominations like a Baptist, SBTC, Texas Baptist, local Baptist associations. So this is Texas. So there's several Baptist different groups at the table. But we'll also have groups like Presbyterian groups, Bible church groups, Vineyard, AG, Anglican, different networks like in Acts 29, we have ARC churches, across the board. I know I'm leaving several out, but yeah, some Lutheran groups. So it's definitely a variety, which I love. And I love that for our especially it's so fun we intentionally design our residencies. We have a cohort that we do for our finishing residencies. We like them to be diverse. We like them to be diverse ethnically, regionally, in terms of where they're planting around Houston, but also, denominationally, because I love the conversation, where it's a safe place for the planters to kind of process things off one another. And it's great because they grow to be great friends. And it's a concept that I think one of the things we've learned, in terms of, what it's not really a difference in doctrine that breaks down unity. I think it's a lack of love that really breaks down unity. So what we've seen in the relationships, when people love each other, get together, they'll work those things out, even though there may be, I got some theological differences, but it's like, oh man, this is my brother or sister and I love them. And because that relationship is so strong, they'll figure out some of the theological or just agree to disagree and realize, all right, we'll figure this out in heaven.
But we can still love each other.
We can still love each other, right? Yeah. That's the mark of the church anyway. So I think that's been a huge thing. And that's what that's why the relationship component is so important, bringing people together. And I think so. One of the pieces I think we've seen, Andrew, you referenced Houston. I think what we've seen in Houston, I think you get that feel that the pastors, they love one another as they know each other.
Wow, what a great testimony to the world, really, to the city, that you have a diverse group of people that actually love one another.
Yeah.
Which is critical. I mean, I think Jesus did claim that they will know us by our love.
Yeah.
Right. And so that should be something we're striving for. That shouldn't be one of those verses we cast off, only use for t-shirts or putting up in our homes, but then not live out on a weekly basis. We're real good at that these days. You hit a bunch of really wonderful and fascinating things. I know what you mean by our gatherings. Our listeners may not. And then you also referenced residencies. Our listeners may not know what those are or the levels of them. So can you talk about now the Houston Church Planting Network, which was grown out of your time at Clear Creek? You launched into, I'm telling a bit of your story. You jumped in, united with some original pastors about 12 years ago. And HCPN has been going for 12 years. It has steadily and slowly grown, as you said, over lots and lots and lots and lots of cups of coffee. So now, how many churches are a part of HCPN, and what are we doing to actually continue HCPN going?
Yeah. So, going back to I'll kind of back up a little bit, but on the Acts 1:8, that our Jerusalem, I talked about the 4B area. I know we got some partnership conversations, but as we looked at those verses, our ends of the earth was, for Clear Creek, we do missions that results in church planting. So just philosophy there. And then as we looked at our Judea, Samaria, we really said for us, that was Greater Houston. And so I mentioned, how big it is, the diversity, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. Right now, it's 250 people a day. Greater Houston is growing by. So that kind of prompted, it's like, all right, how do we really get after this city together? And again, it's like the same philosophy of the 4B area. Obviously, one church can't take responsibility for 7 million people by themselves. So you have to have multiple churches working together. And so that's really kind of was the springboard for HCPN. And so we did a first gathering, and it wasn't like, so it was like November or December 2009. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to present the strategic plan of the Houston Church Planting Network. We didn't have a name. I mean, there was nothing like that. But at that first gathering, we said, we feel like God's stirring something. We want it to be about Houston. And again, talked about the city, talked about the need. We want to be about church planting, meaning that was going to be our organizing kind of principle. We're going to organize around seeing the multiplication of churches. And we wanted to function like a network, or from the very beginning, we talked about being a network of networks. We realized we had to have multiple tribes, denominations, networks at the table if we were really going to see something happen. Keller talks about that. He's got a quote. He wrote an article called Movement Dynamics that came out about that same time in 2009, where he says, if you're really going to reach a city, you got to have multiple denominations, networks, ministries that are gathering around a core of church multiplication. So there's probably some Keller influence in there as well, which isn't a bad person to be influenced by. So it's kind of that what was stirring. So we did an initial gathering. And it was mainly church planters, maybe one or two established churches. We had been doing a coaching center and a residency just in-house at Clear Creek. And it was like, hey, here's the vision. Don't have a name for it. I remember someone said, hey, why don't you just call it the Houston Church Planting Network? Anyways, that's what stuck. We're not one of those created ephesiology people that are creative with names and things like that. So that's what stuck. But really after that first meeting, it was crickets afterwards. It wasn't like, yes, Savior, Houston is saved. It wasn't anything like that. It was like crickets. The church planters in the room were like, man, thanks for the lunch. This is awesome. I'll be back. But established churches are like, all right, we got our own thing to do. Good luck with that. So really for the first several years, we continued to meet. We felt like, all right, let's just keep meeting and see what happens. And so we'd meet once a month, usually, 25 to 40 planters from around the city, something like that. Sometimes maybe 15, other times maybe 50, something like that, where we just meet. We'd have a speaker somewhere from around Houston, talk something about church planting, continue to share the vision. This is where we believe God's going to go, where we want to go. And that was it. And so at that time, it was just still, again, a lot of relationship building for that first 3 or 4 years. And then it was probably about, I think, I have to go back to my calendar, 2013, maybe somewhere in there. I think the fall of 2013, we had one of our gatherings and it was just different. I think we had a few other key people in the room. It was at Kingsland. Bruce, our lead pastor, cast vision. And I think something just clicked. It was almost like the Spirit said, all right, now it's time, something like that, and begin to get a lot of momentum after that gathering. And the momentum, we'd always had kind of church planters coming to the table, but more established churches began to say, hey, we want to be a part of this. And so I think from that time on, it was really kind of seeing momentum build. So now over the years, we've got, I think, probably 135 churches now that are part of HCPN. Still a lot of church plants. I think, over 80 of those are new church plants in the last decade. Again, multiple denominations, diversity. So excited about that. Feel like we still got a long way to go. It feels like we just scratched the surface with that, but it's a start. And then, what we do now, we've talked about those gatherings. We've continued to do those. It's been pushing the flywheel for us. So we meet monthly, or usually about 9 times a year with those. And those are just a time to, again, build relationships, cast vision, be encouraged, hear something about church planting. So just, again, keep pushing the flywheel. If you're new to Houston, hopefully you'll show up to one of those or hear about them and get together with other people and realize, all right, you're not the only crazy one who wants to plant a church. There's other crazy people in this city. So those are our gatherings. We actually celebrated our 100th gathering in August of this year. So we've been doing those a while. And so a couple other things we do residencies. You heard me mention that. So we started with what we call the finishing residency. Those for those that will plant churches within about a year. Kind of realized we need to do a better job with the pipeline. So we've got a foundational residency for those that are kicking the tires for church planting. That's probably further out or still pursuing church planting. And then we've got a post kind of after you launch, we call fortifying cohorts that are kind of built on, all right, you've got your prospectus and realize now you've planted, all right, you can throw that out because now everything changes, in the real world. So kind of processing what you're learning in the fortifying cohorts. That's residencies. And then we continue to do our other kind of lever, if you would. So we got gatherings, residencies. We just say we're facilitating collaboration every chance we get. So, it could be between churches, between regions, between denominations. So we'll bring the network leaders together probably 3 times a year where we're sharing best practices, trying to learn from one another, the different networks that are kind of connected to HCPN and partnering together. We're now beginning to do some regional stuff. Trying to, again, you heard how big Houston was. So trying to think strategically about how we break up Houston and be more proactive in different geographies around the city. So that's a little bit kind of some of the things we're doing with HCPN right now.
That sounds a lot more than just a little bit. That sounds
That's
like
what I was just thinking. It's a lot more than just some of the things that you're doing.
So it's built over time, it's little by little, right? So.
Yeah, neat. Well, share with us, Chad, the vision. What are you guys hoping to see happen, not just in Houston, but even around the country?
Yeah, I think out of our last board meeting, we had, I think, 3 primary initiatives that we're really praying towards and moving forward. One was increasing the commitment to prayer and fasting in our city as kind of the impetus for church planting. I mean, if you read the church planting movements, Garrison talks about, all right, every church planting movement, it's a strong commitment to corporate prayer, right? So every movement you've seen down in history seems to have prayer at the root. So we're committed to that. Again, not just as a strategy, although I like strategically.
We checked our box on prayer.
Yes, exactly. It's like, how are we really seeking the face of God together? I mean, that's really our heart with that. And so we're really diving into that. We've got some things coming up this fall that are kind of helping us move that direction with prayer and fasting. Another one is, all right, we want to, how does gospel saturation for us? We don't want it to just be a theme. We want it, again, to be something we are truly getting after. So the hope is to grow to 400 churches in the next 5 years that are working together, really to see Houston saturated with the gospel. So part of that is developing a regional strategy, developing a better partner strategy, things like that. So that's something we're working on. There's kind of a lot of tentacles to that, or different parts of helping develop that. I think developing the pipeline for more church planners is also a part of that. It's something we're working on. And the third thing is we've started we're just calling city networks. And it's again, more like how we've started HCPN. It's not like, all right, here's a great strategic plan. But I think we saw something. We were getting a lot of calls from different cities or leaders in different cities the last several years, where the Spirit seems to be striking a match in those places as well. It's like, all right, it's like what I vision this kind of boiling pot you know how water begins to boil and you begin to see like a few bubbles here and there. And that's what I, you know, in the last 5 years, you'd see a few of these. And now it feels like it's happening like this, in terms of collaboration in cities or churches or leaders coming together. And I think just because maybe they've heard of HCPN or we've been doing a little bit longer, they're like, hey, can you tell us what you're doing, what you've learned? And so we did our first learning lab, actually just a few weeks ago in September. We had 13 different cities in, 3 of those were global cities, 10 others from around the United States that are trying to pursue something similar, not just an HCN vision, but a vision for their city around collaboration, around multiplication, cross-denominationally, really a translocal initiative for their city. So, and my Excel file now probably has 30 to 40 cities or places that I know of people that are working on that. So I think God's just stirring something up with that. So we, you know, if we can help with that, we want to, and we're excited about what's moving that, what seems to be moving that direction.
Well, that is exciting, Chad, to hear what God is doing, what he has done through the efforts there. And I love the fact that there's such an emphasis on unity and love, laying aside our doctrinal differences and really treating each other like brothers and sisters in Christ, like we are. So I appreciate that.
I think my bonus question, after all that we have heard about HCPN, what it has been, how it came, how it's operating, and where it's going. One of the things that I at least want to try to always mention or think about when we have guests on podcasts is, how are we actually seeing lostness impacted, right? Like, is this another rah, Christians feel good about being Christians, but the lost world remains lost? Like, how is HCPN impacting those who don't yet know Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we've all seen the statistics on church plants, right? Church plants tend to reach, you know, going back to Keller's Why Plant Churches article, that's now 20 plus years old, but kind of some of the statistics on that, you know, more people are going to tend to find Jesus in a church plant that maybe haven't come to church before. Not that they're not coming to Christ in other churches, but just percent wise. So I think that's one of the reasons we built it around the organizing principle has been church planting. So that's been our heart. So obviously we want to see churches that are being planted, not by, all right, we're sending a whole bunch of people from other churches or gathering from other churches, but hopefully we're reaching lostness and planting out of the harvest. So that's ultimately our heart. Now, do we have some great statistics? Hey, let me pull these out. No, but do we have stories? Yeah, there's a lot of stories. But I feel like, man, we need more. And some of that's right, a move of God, right? We want to see people. The hope is that, all right, there's tons of gospel sowing going on. And that's what one of our board members, Jeremiah, talks about. You know, he talks about movements. You see him at a crossroads, always at a crossroads of unified corporate prayer and intentional gospel proclamation. And he talks about that crossroads. And I think that's something we're focused on as well, is like, all right, that's why we're doing what we're doing, right? We want to see lost people come to know Jesus ultimately. So if we're not, then it's probably time to fold HCPN.
Pack it up.
Yep.
Well, the other day we were gathering, I think this may have been at the 100th gathering. Was it Bruce? Who I can't remember if it may have been Bruce, but it was just a graphic, right? It was a photo. It was like a mosaic, and there was just a whole bunch of people. And I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I just tune out those big, large mosaics because it was like, that looks cool, but you know, how many stock photos did they put together to make that wonderful looking image? And so that's where my mind had gone. And then again, it was either you or Bruce, but somebody came up and said, just so you know, everybody who's in this photo behind us, they've come to Christ because of one of the churches the HCPN has either planted or partnered with. Yeah. And it was shocking. It was stark because, again, maybe it was because of what I read into that photo, you know, large photo, lots of different faces. I don't know them. I almost don't care. And then to be like, no, these are the faces. These are the people.
Why?
These are the people who now know Jesus through the efforts of us collaborating as churches. And it was very moving. And it just hit me in my spirit in a different way. So I know it's happening. And I'm very excited that it's happening, but I never, ever, ever want us to lose sight of that mission, right? On the
Yeah.
two
Yep.
wings of collaboration. I love the relationship. I think the relationship is what pulls so many of us back into continuing on with HCPN, but it's holding tight to the mission and never losing sight of it. That is just so invigorating. Well, Chad, thank you for your time today. If anybody was stirred by what they heard from you or are now interested in figuring out what's going on in their city, how would they reach you?
Yeah, you can email me at chad@hcpn.org. That's probably the best way. I'm usually pretty good at email. So you can hit me up there, chad@hcpn.org, or you can look at the hcpn.org website or citynetworks.org website as well. That's some information.
It's so great. And I know that we've kind of like just scratched the surface of what HCPN is doing and where God's moving. So I hope that you, the listener, are excited by what you've heard and want to know more. So please reach out to Chad. If you have heard other things as a part of the Ephesiology podcast, we would invite you to jump online, go to ephesiology.com, engage with us on Facebook, or check out masterclasses.ephesiology.com to find out more about how you can grow in your theological education and continue to impact the area that God has placed you for his name and for his kingdom. So for Chad, for Michael and myself, thank you for joining us on Ephesiology.